Good morning, church. It's good to see you this morning. We have several holes, folks that are traveling. They wanted to see the leaves, or they wanted to get away, or they heard Paul was preaching. I don't know. But they're not here this morning. Remember them in your prayers, that they'll have safe journeys, they'll get home and be all right. We do miss them and look forward to them coming back. We hope that you'll stay around and enjoy our fellowship meal. This is Fifth Sunday. Fifth Sunday traditionally at River Road has been a time of eating and fellowship, and as the kids say, church eat church. And I know when I use that, some folks think that I'm weird, and that's true too. But that's just the expression that the young people use. And so we will have a devotional after our, as Jay said, after our food, and then we will have let the kids do trunk or treat. I got it right that time, Suzanne. Mark it down. Yeah, thank you, Jay. Notorious for screwing that up. But we are glad that you're here. Hope you'll stay for any and all of that. And do remember, no 6 o'clock service tonight because of having all of this today. But we'll go back to our regular schedule next week as well. We're glad that you're here. Do be mindful of all that's going on. River Road, of course, Wednesday night, 6:30. Then George's class, yes, this Tuesday. Yeah, Thursday. It's one of those days. It's on my calendar, George. I'll be here. Just come get me out of my office. But Thursday, 10 o'clock, George has a wonderful class. And then if you like, we go out to eat if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine too. We'll talk about you. But no, we won't. But we'd be glad to have you for that and all the things that go on. This is a wonderful congregation, and we are blessed to be a part of it. Suzanne and I, I told class we went to Helen, Georgia for a few days, enjoyed all the sights, the scenery, enjoyed a little time together, enjoyed being in the same car. Sometimes truths come out, and we're going to save, I told you Wednesday night, we're going to save a story, but Suzanne called me a name during the week, and we're going to save that for something else. But I know she loves me. 39 years of marriage, and she's still with me. So what a great blessing she's been to me and to my ministry and to my life, and love her to death. But we spent some time in Helen, Georgia, and then went down last Sunday and spent time with Graceland, and Ethan and Kara just happened to be there. But anyway, we spent time with Graceland. God still works. There's a master violinist that came out and was going to have a concert. And as he came out on stage, he told everyone, he said, I am going to play tonight this concert on one of the most expensive violins in the world. And so he began to play. And he played one song, and oh, it was beautiful. And he played another song, and oh, the audience just enwrapped just in what was going on and the beauty of the songs and the notes and how wonderful it was. And he played a third song, beautiful once again. At the end of the third song, he took the violin and he crashed it in the floor, and it went into a lot of pieces. Everybody went, oh. And he said, I must tell you the truth. He said, that was a cheap violin. He said, now I'll play the rest of the concert in the most expensive violin in the world. And that he did. And yet no one in the audience, because they were not in tune maybe as he, could tell a difference between the two violins. They sounded alike, and the music was wonderful, and the music was beautiful, and they were enthralled with all that they heard. You realize that we're like that, no matter who we are, no matter where we are in our station of life. God is the bow that pulls across our life and uses us. Do we understand that God is at work? Sometimes we have this mistaken idea that God doesn't care. That God is so far out there that God has no concept of what we're going through, what we're dealing with. He has no concept of our anxieties, our problems, our heartaches, our hurts. He has no idea what's going on in this world and all the sin and all the wickedness and all the evil that exists in this world today. He has no idea. Or then, as we're sitting thinking about that, we rationalize it with this idea: he knows, but he doesn't care. He knows, but he's indifferent to it all. He's just letting it play out. He's sort of like, if you will, he's a master chess player, but he's just kind of letting the game play itself out. That's the feeling of some. Not correct. There are those that would contend that God really doesn't work anymore today. That God is a silent God. He made the world and all things therein, and then he just left it. And he left it for man to mess up. But he has adopted or adapted a hands-off philosophy. And such is not true. For one thing, and when you walk out this morning, you may not remember the 3 points, you may not remember the biblical citations that are made, but if you remember this idea, God still works, it will have been a successful lesson. God is alive. God is well. Daniel the prophet said there is a God in heaven. He is correct in that statement. But not only is there a God in heaven, but our God is alive and our God is well. And he works today, just like he worked in Bible times. Because you see, oftentimes, here's what we say. We read the Bible and we see where God said, God spoke to Noah, God spoke to Abraham, God spoke to this one, God spoke to that one. And we say, oh man, if he'd just speak to us today. Well, let's consider that idea. Let's consider the idea that God still speaks, because God still works. God works today, first of all, on us. Man, that TV screen is so beautiful and big. You know, we're going through some renovations. We got us a big screen TV. If some of y'all in the back get sunburned, we know what it's from. It's great. I appreciate it. I'm thankful for it. God works on us. You ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about the fact that really God is not asleep, but God is working on us today? God is working on us in many different ways. You know, God expects growth, doesn't he? God expects us to be individuals that are constantly improving, that there is a marked difference in growth. Now, we may not see it, we may not necessarily feel it, but if we apply ourselves, growth will occur. What's the difference? Stop thinking about what's the difference between a tree and a post? A preacher, they're made of wood. That's a similarity. I said difference. Well, you know, a post is usually cut. Yes. The post is usually down on the ground. Yes. The real difference, though, between a post and a tree is that a tree is alive. A tree's growing. Right now, the leaves are turning. They're beautiful. They were beautiful in Helen, Georgia. Suzanne and I saw some beautiful scenery. But at the same point in time, too, it won't be long before all we see of the trees are sticks and twigs and branches. But Lord willing, spring comes. And if it comes, if the Lord does not come back, spring will come and the leaves will come out again. A resurrection, if you will, of sorts. That tree's alive. It may be dormant for a while, but it's alive. Post has been cut down. It is removed from its water source. It is removed from its nutrition source. And at the point and time in which it is cut down, it begins to deteriorate. And it begins to rot. I don't know about you, but I want to grow. Why? Because Paul wrote to the church of Galatians, the 6th chapter and verse 3, and he says, the individual that thinks he's something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Deceives himself. I don't want to think that I'm something when I'm nothing. I want to grow because that's what the Lord expects of me. He says, his newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word that you may thereby grow. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. I want to grow. Why? Because that's what God wants me to do. That's what God wants me to be. And sometimes, though, I'm not like the tree growing. I'm more like the post that's been cut down. We need to remember what Isaiah wrote in Isaiah 61 and verse 8. Do you remember those words in Isaiah 61 verse 8? The prophet says that we're the clay, and you, talking about God, are the potter, and we are all the works of your hand. You say, I want to grow because that's what God expects of me. But God's working on me so that I will grow. God's working on me so that I will get better, so that I will improve, so that I'll have those marked levels of increase. God's working on me. God's working on you. Preacher, I can't tell it. I guarantee you, if you're a regular student of the Bible, you know more today than you knew 3 months ago. Now, you say, well, I've forgotten more. I understand. But at the same time, too, you've improved. You've gone up. Everything's getting better. You're growing. Why? Because God's working on you. Why? Because if you allow God, He's the potter and you're the clay. You ever watched a potter? Suzanne and I, last year when we stopped in Gatlinburg, or year before last, we stopped in Gatlinburg and we were there watching a potter. He'd already thrown the clay, as I said, but he was shaping it and he was molding it. The wheel was turning around and around, and he moved his fingers and wet his fingers in the paper that he had in his hand, and it began to take shape. I can't remember now what exactly he was making, but it began to take shape. I was so enthralled, Suzanne we were so enthralled, we went out and shop and bought some stuff because we just were amazed by what we saw. Well, Isaiah says that's the way we are. God's working on us. Why? Because we're the clay. He's the potter. How does God work on us? How does God work on us? Well, there's a lot of ways that God works on us. God works on us, first of all, through passages. In Psalm 119, the longest chapter of all the Bible, talks about the Bible. And in Psalm 119, verse 50, the psalmist makes this statement. He says, this is my comfort in my affliction. Your word, he says, has given me life. This is my comfort in my affliction. Your word, it's given me life. You see, God works on us through his word. As Paul bid farewell, we studied this in the auditorium class here not long ago. As Paul bid farewell to the church at Ephesus in Acts chapter 20, he's bidding farewell to the elders. He'd been there for 3 years on his third missionary journey. He had been in and out sometimes, but for 3 years, basically, he had used Ephesus as his point of reference. And as he had called the elders together and he was telling them, he says, now, brethren, I commend you to God in the word of his grace. You remember what that said? Which is able to build you up. God's word works on us. If we have an open heart and an open mind and are willing to say, as we come to our Bible study on a daily basis, Lord, speak to me. What do you want me to know? What do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? Lord, speak to me. But he works on us not only through passages, but he also works on us through people. Now, I know some people can just aggravate the stew out of it. I had to run to Costco yesterday for a few minutes, and I told Suzanne when we met up in the evening, I said, I now know why Costco only has toys during Christmas time. And she said, why? I said, because one little precious child, I smiled when I said it, lost it. And the whole store heard him for the next 15 minutes cry because, and I watched his mama pull him away from this toy. And maybe he's going to get it for Christmas. I hope he does because he really wanted it. I watched the father just walk behind and he wasn't too excited about any of it. But I thought about the fact that God works on us through people, even though they at times may aggravate us, even though at times they may try us, even though at times they may be the individuals that are part of our consternation. Paul talked about being comforted with the coming of Titus in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 6. Paul told the church at Thessalonica in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, as he had talked about the second coming of the Lord, he says, comfort one another with these words. And the word comfort there means to encourage, to exhort, but exhort one another with these words. Who's going to do it? These people that are talking, these people that are teaching. We could go on and on and on of people that touched people's lives. And in your life, you've probably got people that at one time or another, either when you were going through a difficult time, when you were going through a time of grief or sorrow or sadness, or a time in which seemingly everything was going wrong, the washing machine broke down, the car broke down, and the roof needs fixing because it's got a leak in it. Three things always happen at the same time. And man, when those things happen and you look at it and you think, oh my goodness, when is it going to end? And sometimes there are those people that come and put their arms around you. Those individuals that are like Barnabas of the book of Acts, or like Onesiphorus in 2 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul says that he often refreshed me, not being ashamed of my chains. There are spirit refreshers. There are folks that encourage us, that lift us up, that build us up, that give us the strength and encouragement that we need. And sometimes you're those people that find another person that's in need. Every conversion story in the book of Acts had a human element. Listen to what I said, every conversion story in the book of Acts had somebody teaching. And the lives of those people, whether it was those in the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2 with Peter, or those that Peter came in contact with that we read about through Acts chapter 2 through Acts chapter 11, or whether it was Paul and the people that he came in touch with in the 3 missionary journeys that he went on. He touched the lives of those individuals. You may be that person that is teaching someone, whether by word or by action, because let it be understood that you are the only Bible some people will ever read. You see, God's working on us by people. So we have people, we have passages, problems. James says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing this, that the trying of your faith produces patience. I like that. No, I don't really. Why? Because it says I'm going to have problems, but it's going to produce a good end. The Hebrew writer reminds us in Hebrews chapter 12, what father that loves his son does not chasten him? My son might have said, I love him too much. But yet, when we think about what the Hebrew writer is saying there in Hebrews 12, he says, for whom the Lord loves, he chastens. And then he says in verse 11, with regards to that chastening, afterwards it works the peaceable fruits of righteousness. It's good for us. The psalmist in Psalm 119 said, it was good for me to be afflicted, for therein have I learned your statutes, your laws, your precepts, your way, your will. God works on us, but sometimes it's through those problems. Sometimes it's through those heartaches. Sometimes it's through those hurts. Sometimes it's through those difficulties in life. God works on us through people. God works on us through problems. God works on us through passages. And God works on us through prayers. Who did you pray for this morning? Did you pray for the sick? You probably did. Did you pray for our missionary? You probably did. Did you pray for our elders? I hope you did. Did you pray for our deacons? I hope you did. Did you pray for me? I definitely hope you did. Did you? Of course, you probably say, yeah, we prayed we'd get out in time this morning, but we're going to make it. Did you pray for Bible school teachers? Did you pray for the parents? Did you pray for grandchildren? Did you pray for people that are going through difficulties in Israel, in Ukraine, and in other countries? Who'd you pray for? Paul talked about praying for others. It's kind of interesting Ephesians 1, Colossians 1, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. And there are other passages, but Paul says to those brethren, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. The prayer of the righteous man avails or works, James 5 verse 16, much. God's working on us. But in his working on us, he's working on us through all of these avenues. And thanks be to God that he is not a silent God. He is not a quiet God, but he's working on us. But God is also working through us. You know, God has a lot of work to do if you stop and think about it. You might say, preacher, God's up to it. God's able to do it. Yes. But think about the work that God has to do. Think about the souls that are in conflict now that he has to comfort. Think about the sick that he has to run to the aid to. Think about those that are going through physical struggles and those that are going through financial struggles and those that are going through character struggles and those that are going through problems with others. And God wraps his arms around them. Think about the individual that's really not struggling but just living. Think about the individuals that each day get up in the morning and go to work, struggle at the face. Think about those that are feeling the angst and the pains of growing a little older and seeing income shrink as that which is spent increases. Think about those folks that really are having a good day. They really are. They're having a really good day. Everything's going well. You know, nothing's broken, nothing's torn up. They're at peace with everyone. And while the world itself may be in chaos, they understand that God's in charge. We have to understand that just as many ways we pointed out in the first point, God's not only working on us, but God is working through us. You see, God has always used people. Whether he used the widower Ezekiel, or whether he used the tent makers of Aquila and Priscilla, or whether he used a man who was a Pharisee by the name of Paul, or whether he used a prophet by the name of Isaiah, or whether he used a shepherd boy who was a harp player by the name of David, or he used a man that was righteous to build an ark for his people and for the animals. We could go through countless numbers of people in the Bible. God worked through them. Well, guess what? God's working through you. When Paul came back, Paul and Silas' first missionary journey, when they came back to Jerusalem, they came back to Antioch in Acts chapter 14 and Acts chapter 15. Do you remember what it said? How that they rehearsed everything that had happened to them and how that God worked through them. Preacher, I don't believe that's possible. Well, you better, because 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1, what does Paul say? Paul says, we then are laborers together with him. We, us, laborers together with him. God works, and God works through us. You see, you're the sunshine in a lot of people's lives. You're as the old saying goes, he has no hands but our hands to do his work today. He has no voice but our voice to tell men how he died. He has no feet but our feet to show men the way. We're what he's using today. And so many times we want to close the door and leave the world behind. Just leave me out of it. Don't get me involved. And yet we're the very ones that God, who has not forsaken us, the promise. Remember Joshua 1, Hebrews 13, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. So 9 times in the Bible, that's the promise from God. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'm right there with you. But sometimes you got to know you're the one God's using. You're the one that God's working through. You're the one that's setting the place. You're the one that's showing the example. You're the ones that folks are watching. You're the ones that are as the light and as the salt, as the ambassadors, as the epistles of God, as the sheep in the fold. You're influencing all those that you come in contact with. Your children, your grandchildren, your next-door neighbor, fellow that you work with, the fellow that cut you off in the parking lot that you'd like to tell a thing or two, but you just smile and wave at them and say, well, good luck. The individual that you see in the store that you can tell is not having a good day, but you just smile and nod your head. God's working through you. And if God is working through you, then you need to be sure that you're that open vessel that's willing to be used. That you're the one that says, you know, God, I can do this. I can be used. Paul, in Colossians chapter 1, in the prayer that Paul had for the church at Colossae, for the brethren at Colossae, that you might walk worthy of the Lord, to all things being fruitful in every good work. Paul says, I'm praying for you, Colossae. I want you, brethren, to understand that I want you to be fruitful. God wants you to be fruitful, and he wants you to be fruitful in every good work, everything that you put your hand to. Do the best you can. Because God's working through you. You're working on that individual to teach them the truth. You're working on that individual to show them what Christianity is all about, to show them how Christ lived his life and how you're trying to live yours. You're trying to show them what they must do in order to be saved, but you're trying to show them so that they can go to heaven. God's working. He's not working only on you, but he's working through you. But then finally, God works for us. Romans chapter 8. Lord willing, the month of December on Sunday nights, we're going to be just studying Romans 8. It's one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, if God be for us, who can be against us? Here's what it says. Paul says, God's on our side. God's on our team. God is the one that we needed. God is the one that we wanted. And God is the one that's leading our team. God is for us. God is not against us. God is not working to see that we demise, that we are individuals that fail. Matter of fact, you remember in Joshua chapter 1, when God told Joshua, who was fixing to, well, he's actually had by Joshua chapter 1, but he was taking over for Moses. There's another one that God used, Moses and Joshua. God used Joshua. God told Joshua if he'd do certain things, basically stay with the law. Do you remember the words? And you will have success. Stay with the word. Don't deviate. Walk in all of its paths. But preacher, is that really so? Is God really working for us? Is he using his power and his might? Is he using his abilities and his knowledge? Is he using those omni things that we talk about, the omniscience and the omnipotence? Is he using all of those things for his glory and for our good? And the answer is yes. Why? Because Paul said in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. God's working for us. Esther may have had a hard time believing that when Haman had his plot to kill the Jews. But come to find out, God in his providence protected his people at that point in time. Paul may have wondered, we're fixing to get into Paul's journey to Rome in Sunday morning Bible class, the last few chapters of the book of Acts. Paul does not get there easily. But he gets there. How? Providence of God. Oh, preacher, there's got to be more. Oh, yeah. Think for me about Joseph for a minute. And we know the story. We'll not get into all the details. But Joseph is one that loved his brothers, but his brothers sold him into slavery. He was about 17 years old. Now, we know the story, so I'm just going to skip to the end if you don't mind. 17 years old, he's sold into imprisonment. the best we can tell and the best we can put together, at 39 years of age, Joseph saves his family. 22 years later. Took that long. And it wasn't easy. But Joseph was being used by God. And God was working for him. And God does the same for us. Now, sometimes we have to be like Paul said in the book of Philemon. When he sent back Onesimus, he said, perhaps. Yeah, perhaps, because we don't have a divine interpreter to tell us, well, that's the providence of God. But we understand that God works. And we have the comfort, we have the assurance that if we commit our ways to him, trust also in him, he'll bring it to pass, right? Isn't that what Psalmist said in Psalm 37, verse 3? The answer is yes. God takes care of his own. And so, in Psalm 116, verse 1, I love the Lord because he heard my voice and my supplications, because he inclined his ear to me. I, therefore, will love him. I, therefore, will call upon him as long as I live. Powerful words. Powerful words. Sometimes it's very hard to understand the providence of God. The story is told in 1933, a young man was born to a family. The family at that time had 2 boys. He was born 1933. Catch that? Depression. Hard times, difficult times. His mother tells him the story. He's about 40 years of age. He comes back to visit his mother. He visited her often, but she was telling him the story. He relayed this then publicly. She tells him the fact that not long after he's born, now I should backtrack a little bit. There were 2 boys. He's the third. There was actually a fourth that had already passed away when he was born in 1933. Not long after he is born, times are hard. No one has anything. No one has any money. No one has anything. A sister is born. And at first, the mother said she didn't know how in the world she was going to pay for the child, her and the father, how in the world they was going to pay for it, how in the world they was going to do it, how in the world were they going to manage. Nobody had anything, and they had nothing to give. And it wasn't too long after that the little girl contracted a disease that was going to take $27 for each treatment, and she was going to have several treatments, $27 for each treatment. And the father only made $25 a week. Hard time. And then she said, but you grew up, as the mother's talking to her son. You grew up. No, I was proud of you. I was proud of all my children. The little girl, matter of fact, after all the treatments, 7 years later, after all of her treatment, she passed away. But the mother said, I was so proud of you. And he said, but why? And she said, you were the one that grew up and started going to church. And you were the one that not only started going to church, you're the one that learned the Bible and learned what God tells us for our life. And now you've converted me, your father, your brothers, their wives. You've converted the whole family. And I'm so proud of you. And I love you for what you've done for this family. Don't sell out. Keep living. Keep pushing. Keep growing. Why? Because God is working on you. He still works today. This morning, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation by becoming a New Testament child of God, being immersed for the remission of your sins, or you need to rededicate your life, won't you come? All together we stand and sing.